Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. And today we're revisiting a story that I read around 2 weeks ago, but now we've got the final update. So let's get started. This post is from the subreddit Am I the A-hole and it's by user OrganicLet5948. Am I the a-hole for threatening my wife with divorce after she quit her job to be a tradwife? I don't even know where to begin with this. Me, 34 male, and my wife, 33 female, have 2 kids together, 11 male and 9 female. My wife and I have been together for 12 years and have been married for 8. Around a year ago, I noticed my wife was increasingly sending me these tradwife or traditional housewife TikTok videos. I have nothing against that type of relationship, but I don't think it makes sense in our current family situation. I do earn quite a bit more than my wife and enough to sustain our family on my own, but I don't see the need to do so. I work 80% and my wife works 50%. And besides Wednesdays, when both of us are working, either one of us is always home for the kids. I could work 100% and let my wife be a stay-at-home mom, but again, both of my kids are attending school and in my mind there is no need for my wife to be at home 24/7. She got increasingly pushy about it over the past 2 months, and again, I just kept on telling her that there wasn't any need for that. I asked her, if we decided to go down that route, what would she do during the hours my kids attended school? I know damn well our house doesn't need to be cleaned for 6 hours a day. She would constantly try to butter me up with, "You would have dinner ready every day when coming home from work," and something about unlimited oral and some BS like that. Again, in the nicest way possible, I would remind her that our kids weren't toddlers and our current work-life schedule allowed us to function perfectly fine. We got into a pretty heated argument 2 weeks ago about it, and my wife completely stopped having sex with me to show me what I would be missing out on. She's basically been treating me like a roommate since. I just thought she would get over it and that it was just a phase, but God, was I wrong. I came home from work yesterday and saw a bunch of presents on the dining table. At first, I thought they were for me since my birthday was in a week, but I then saw the labels on them addressed to my wife. I read one of the letters attached to one of the presents. The last sentence was literally, "It was such a pleasure working alongside you, and I wish you all the best moving forward." I thought this was some sick prank. A few minutes later, my wife just casually strolled into the living room acting like nothing was wrong. I guess she saw my mad expression and had the audacity to tell me, "You'll get over it." I just lost it. I just left without saying another word and went to my parents' house. I feel absolutely disrespected. Why the F would my wife think it was okay to just quit her job without telling me and just expect me to be fine with it? My wife has been bombarding me with texts and calls demanding to know where I am and that the kids miss me. I just told her to find a lawyer and that I was done with her. Then I proceeded to block her. My son just sent me a voicemail crying and asking why I was divorcing mom and if I was leaving the family. And I guess that kind of broke my heart. I haven't responded and honestly don't know what to say to him. My mother-in-law has also been demanding that I return home and apologize to my wife. My parents also seem to be siding with my wife since they are traditional Muslims. My mom also used to be a stay-at-home mom. I feel like I'm wrong for immediately jumping to divorce without hearing her out. Besides this whole job drama, I love my wife too much for this to be the end of our otherwise perfect marriage. On the other hand, I feel like I've lost complete trust in her. Should I just swallow my pride and let my wife stay at home from now on? Or should I follow through on divorcing her? How should I navigate this situation? Am I the a-hole here? Now, as I already said at the beginning of the video, I'm revisiting the story because we have the final update. I'm not gonna give my commentary again, but the summary is that I think OP is not the a-hole. Now let's move on. Global Monk 5778 says, if you had agreed to this, then it wouldn't be an issue, but she has lied and tried to manipulate you into this, and that's what I have a problem with. She has no respect for you whatsoever. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have school-age kids. One is disabled and so am I, so I couldn't work if I wanted to. I think my husband resents my free time sometimes, but it's spent hooked up to pain-relieving machines. It's not like I'm sunbathing, and our situation was a joint decision. Your wife, however, is taking the piss. Consider your children, though. You need to talk to them and explain to them what's going on in an age-appropriate way, as at this point, you don't know what your wife has been filling their heads with. Also, fill your in-laws in on the truth in case she's twisted it with them as well. Make sure you keep in close contact with your children so they know you love them and aren't abandoning them. And then, divorce your wife. She's shown her true colors and how little she respects you and your marriage. Now she gets to reap the benefits. Not your effing problem says, not the a-hole. She's manipulative. I'm sorry, but I do think you should divorce her. Everything she did was trying to manipulate you to have her way. 1, I'll give you head. 2, then stop sex and treating you as a roommate. 3, quit her job. 4, tell the kids. She escalated her behavior every time the previous attempt didn't work. I don't see how this is a one-time thing. This is a personality trait. She only cared for you to pay the bills. And PovBy899 says, go with it, but split the finances so she doesn't have access to your money. Don't give her any allowance and don't buy anything for her other than food, basic clothes, and other necessities. Like, how the F do you expect your partner to fund your life because you are lazy and don't feel like working? Or just straight up divorce her, but make sure as effing hell she doesn't get $1 more than she should. Let her enjoy this newfound freedom without someone else funding it. Additional information from OP's comments. The fact that she would be home relaxing isn't the issue. It's the fact that we now have to cut down on our current expenses significantly, and I'm not even sure if my company is willing to let me work 100%. Her quitting meant major financial consequences for us as a family. She contributed 1/3 of our family income. We live in Europe, so adjusting our living costs to the US market, I would say I earn around $7,000 to $8,000 a month. Before this, the only red flag I saw was her constantly ignoring me if we disagreed, but usually that was for maybe 2 days at most. This was the first time she did that for a longer period. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any external pressure put on my wife to do this, but I'd need to talk to her and find out. Same with work. She never communicated any of this. Of course, if she told me she was unhappy with her current job or company, I'd be more than willing to make that sacrifice temporarily for her, but it just seemed to come from a place of selfishness. For me, working 100% is my needs also not being met. I had lofty dreams as a kid and I've put all of that aside for my kids. I work for my kids and basically live for my kids now. It's the man that I am. If her needs require me to neglect my own, how is that fair? I made it clear to her that I, under no circumstance, would accept what she was suggesting. The way I see it, when somebody refuses your proposal, it's your job to find an alternative that works for both. She never brought up anything. I would have been fine with her working fewer hours and maybe me working 90%, but my condition is that I have to at least have a morning or evening with the kids before or after school. She never did any of that and just chose to brute force her way to what she wanted. She never considered what I wanted. As for my kids, she was the one to tell them about the divorce. She told an 11-year-old about the divorce. I've only been gone for a day and will return tomorrow. I've let my son know that none of this is his fault and that he shouldn't worry about anything. This is purely about me and his mom. Issues between adults stay in between adults. Telling your adolescent son that your dad might leave is next level manipulative. Finally, I don't think that this post should spread hate to those who currently are or were tradwives. It's a completely acceptable type of relationship if both parties agree to it. And that's my primary issue with all of this. I just came on here to see if I was being out of order since most of our families believe that to be the case. Fundamentally, I want my family back. I have nothing else to live for. I don't want to remarry, and that's not something I ever plan on doing. I wanted to see if there was a neutral way to go about things. The majority of the community was agreeing with OP that divorce is the way to go in this situation, but it doesn't sound like that's something that OP really wants to do. He knows his wife was being incredibly manipulative and dismissive, and he is very hurt from what she did, but it still sounds like his family and keeping his family unit together is the most important thing for him. Now, of course, we've got the update, so how about we move on with that to see what happened next. Before I update you all, I want to add a few crucial details that I missed mentioning in my original post. I suffer from a genetic heart condition that puts me at risk of stress-induced cardiac arrest. I used to work full-time but was forced to cut down on my work after suffering a silent heart attack. This was nearly a decade ago, but since then, I've worked on my own physical and mental well-being. Some people didn't understand me constantly mentioning why it was such an issue working the extra 20%. I honestly don't know how much time I have left, and my kids are the most important thing in my life. For my own mental health, I must get to spend time with my kids throughout the week. Besides my wife and kids, I have nothing. I hate my effing job and purely continue for the sake of my kids and wife. Well, after spending a day at my parents' house, eventually I felt enough time had passed for me to gather my thoughts on everything. What she did seemed like the ultimate slap in the face, but I went back with the intention to resolve this and didn't want to escalate this effing nightmare. My wife seemed happy when I returned but wasn't apologetic at all. The kids, especially my son, were ecstatic. That sort of made me ignore the lack of remorse for the time being. That same night, after putting my kids to bed, I told her we needed to have a serious discussion. I told her how I felt about everything she did. The fact that she knows about my health condition and still went through with it. The fact that I set clear boundaries and she still chose to quit her job without my consent. I also spoke about how the fact that she told my son that I was going to abandon the family really felt like a stab in the back. How throughout all of this, she didn't even seem remorseful once. The fact that she chose her own happiness to my detriment. The fact I sacrificed so much for this family and I got repaid like this. The fact that we now, as a family, have to make major lifestyle changes since a third of our family income vanished. For a split second, I saw an ounce of sadness in her eyes before she went right back to being annoyed with me. I then simply told her to lay out her half of the story. Here is the summary of what she said. She felt ignored by me, constantly rejecting her proposal. She had worked long enough and this was finally the time for her to enjoy her life as a true wife. She also said that I was being a baby about spending extra time with the kids. That really pissed me off and we ended up getting into a heated argument. I couldn't bear any of it anymore and just ended up sleeping in the guest room. Until yesterday, nothing changed. She constantly tried to play everything off and wanted to embrace her new role by constantly trying to have sex with me and by making me my favorite dishes. It just felt like she was trying to manipulate me again. I wasn't having any of it. I just kept on sleeping in the guest room. Well, my birthday was yesterday and after work, my wife and kids picked me up and we ate dinner together. This was probably the first time I genuinely had a smile on my face in a week. Well, that smile vanished because she tried to seduce me again later that night. I rejected her, and to my surprise, she had a full-on mental breakdown. I just held her as she started apologizing for what she did. She claimed she didn't understand how much she hurt me. She was sorry for making me feel like an afterthought, etc. We ended up sleeping in the same bed yesterday. I felt like things were finally moving in the right direction, so I again asked her about searching for a new job today. Instead of getting mad, she just replied, "I need to think about it." Yeah, that's where things are as of today. It feels like progress is being made, but I don't know. This just might be another manipulation tactic of hers. How do you guys move forward in this situation? Could I have done something better? Is she being genuine? I know there are a lot of Redditors who jump straight to divorce. I understand their point of view, but they need to understand that a real family is at stake here. Initially, it got to me, but with me, I just learned to ignore those comments and just started thinking about the woman she used to be. I know she's still in there somewhere. Therapy might definitely be the next step forward. In our culture, divorce is the last resort and extremely frowned upon, especially if there are kids involved. I want to fix this. If she shows no improvement after I tried everything, then I'll go for divorce. Now, up to this point, I think OP's wife is kind of stalling. She's just telling him what he wants to hear, but she's not actually going to go out and look for a job. So how about we move on to the final update to see what happened and how this story ends. Again, I'm beyond grateful for all the love and support you guys have shown me. If I'm being honest with everyone, I've been drinking a lot to get through this mess. I felt like a zombie just wandering around with no purpose. My wife's actions completely broke me. Thankfully, I've managed to cut most of it out over the past week, and that's mostly thanks to Reddit. You guys seriously helped me keep my mind busy with something else besides alcohol. Being reminded that I have two smaller versions of myself looking up to me and learning from the things I do really helped me snap out of it. I've been at my lowest since making my first post, and I think I've just hit a new low. Until last week, nothing changed since my last post. My wife still pranced around enjoying her new lifestyle while I suffered in silence. After posting my update, I did realize that my wife was 100% trying to manipulate me into submitting to her demands. I asked her if she actually started looking for a job, and she hesitated and told me no, and that she needed more time. If I'm being honest, that's all I needed to know from her. I tried making this work, but honestly, I couldn't keep living like that. Every day that passed felt like a part of my soul vanished. My wife kept on trying to please me, but it didn't seem genuine at all. I've also started noticing her getting lazy and starting to neglect my kids. My wife stopped cooking, and after working 9 hours of hell, I was now the one to help my son with his homework and the one to play Barbie with my daughter. I'm not complaining about spending time with my kids, but I could seriously see this becoming worse as time goes on. I don't know where the woman I once fell in love with went, but that thing that lives with me wasn't her. I know a lot of you are going to smile hearing this, but I did tell my wife that I wanted a divorce last week. I came home from work and I saw my wife sitting on the couch watching TV while my daughter was crying in her room. I just snapped at that moment. I told her we needed to have a serious discussion after the kids went to sleep. After I put my kids to sleep, I sat down with her and I told her our marriage was over and that I'll be contacting my lawyer tomorrow. Divorce was never something I ever planned on doing in my life, but I just felt like something needed to change or my kids would be visiting my gravesite in a few years. Our culture frowns upon it, and I knew I was about to get serious backlash for it, but at this point, I couldn't care less. I don't know why, but she thought I was joking and started laughing. I told her I was being serious this time and her manipulation methods weren't going to work on me anymore, and her face just went pale. She then went from screaming at me to crying to blaming me for every issue in the family to begging for another chance. She literally went to get her laptop and tried to apply for jobs on Indeed while begging. I told her to cut the BS and told her I tried my best, but she kept giving me empty promises. I told her that I knew her trying to F me was just a manipulation tactic and not to show her devotion to me, as she puts it. That if she was truly sorry, why didn't she start applying for jobs immediately instead of waiting until I confronted her? That her completely disregarding any of my feelings and needs while purely pursuing her own shows me how selfish she actually is. She knows about my health and still chose to completely F me over. And now this part pissed me off a lot. Her poisoning my son against me when this all started was beyond effed up, and looking back was enough of a reason to divorce her. We ended up fighting for another hour or so, and her constant screaming ended up waking up our daughter, and that's when I told my wife to shut the F up and go to bed. The following day, my mom called me during work and asked if I'd lost my mind or something. My wife told my mom that I was going to divorce her. My mom claimed that I was bringing serious shame onto the family, and she didn't raise me to abandon my kids. Yes, my wife told my mom that I was planning on abandoning my kids and has been feeding my kids the same BS. I explained to my mom the reasons why I wanted a divorce, but she won't budge. If I divorce my wife, I'm a disgrace of a man and my mom wants nothing to do with me. I know my mom well enough to tell that her words are just empty threats, but what hurts me most are the reactions of my kids. My son won't look at me in the eyes and won't even let me anywhere near his room. My daughter just tries to hit me whenever I try to talk to her. I've tried explaining to them that I'm in fact not going to give up on them and their mom and I are just going to separate, but they just seem to believe whatever BS my wife tells them. Friends and in-laws also claim that I'm a monster for making my wife go through this. My wife was served with divorce papers 2 days ago and has been crying non-stop since. My wife told my kids about the divorce papers and they both claim that they will never talk to me again, and in my son's words, I'm a bad husband and father. I cried myself to sleep that night. I thought divorce would bring me peace, but it only brought me one step closer to dark thoughts. But don't worry, I know that I would only hurt my family if I acted on them. I have nothing and am nothing without my kids. Growing up dead poor as a refugee in Germany, I promised myself that I would give my kids a life that I myself could only have dreamed of, but I feel like I failed. I'm sorry for making this post longer than it has to be. Again, I just want to thank everyone for the love and support, but this will probably be my last post. Wishing you all a lovely week. Well, OP, I'm truly sorry that your wife is putting you through this. You definitely don't deserve it, and the parental alienation, that's just a horrible thing to do. Now, I myself, of course, have not gone through what you are going through. So I'm just going to wish for you the biggest of willpower so that you can get through this and keep at it with your kids. Do not let them go. I understand that it may be soul-crushing hearing them say these things to you, but you need to know that those aren't your son's words or your daughter's actions. Those are your future ex-wife through them. Keep all of that information, keep all of those text messages and everything that they're going to say and do, particularly your wife, because if there can be a case to be made for parental alienation, then you can use all of that in your favor. As a father just like you that loves his kids more than anything in the world, my heart goes out to you, OP. Please take care, and thank you for sharing. And for the rest of us, let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user Dawn Beaver. Don't want to pay for my ambulance? How about a helicopter instead? I had an anaphylactic reaction a few months ago and directly received a large bill for being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Apparently, the ambulance company, while owned by the in-network hospital, was out of network, so the bill was on me. Wanting to avoid this situation in the future, I called my health insurance company to ask what ambulance companies were in the network. That's when I learned that absolutely no ambulances for a 150-mile radius are in the network except for 3 helicopter ambulance companies. So, I live in a fairly rural area where many folks are hours away from the nearest hospital and farm accidents are common. So it makes sense that we have helicopter ambulances. But I live in town and a ground ambulance is by far the cheapest and easiest thing for everyone. But it's not in the network. The insurance representative said that the reason the ambulance wasn't covered was to encourage members to use in-network services. So I said the in-network option is a helicopter and I live 3 miles by road from the hospital. Are you sure you want me to use the in-network option? There was a long pause and she said she had to check with her supervisor. A week later, I got a letter from my insurance company saying that my bill was paid in full. It looks like they did not want that in-network option after all. Nicely done, OP. I just love it when logic comes out on top, like it should. Thanks so much for sharing. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.